Is your child sensitive to different textures, to movement, to sounds, to lights, and it's causing them to become avoidant or refusing to participate in different activities? If this sounds like your child, they are likely a sensory avoider. I'm going to share with you my top 5 tips that are going to support your sensory avoider and help them participate more in their everyday life. I'm Lisa, a child behavior expert and a parent coach. I have over a decade of experience as a pediatric occupational therapist. My mission and my passion is to help children by focusing on sensory processing, executive functioning, emotional regulation, and so much more. On my channel, you're going to find practical tips and strategies that you can implement in your day-to-day life that are going to support your child and help them thrive. Does your child hate the different textures of their clothing? Every morning you try to get them ready for school. You've laid out their clothes, but they scream and run away. They refuse to change out of their pajamas and into their day clothes. Or when you vacuum, when you blend something, is your child screaming in agony, covering their ears because the noise is just too unbearable for them? Or maybe when you take them out to the playground and they're climbing up on the playscapes, they're standing there in fear. They're telling you, no, I can't do it. I don't want to go down the slide. I'm afraid to go on the swing. And they're just avoiding the playground now altogether. And it's getting really difficult because you might have another child that loves to go, and then you have your other child who hates going to the playground. These types of activities seem like just your ordinary stuff that most kids do. But for your child, it's so difficult to get them to do any of this stuff. This is what happens when you have a child who is very sensitive to sensory input or a sensory avoider. By asking them to do these small things like getting dressed or brushing their teeth or maybe even eating their breakfast, all of these things can lead into big meltdowns and just flat out refusals. Not only are you facing these daily meltdowns, which are exhausting as it is, but these meltdowns are causing you to be late for work. They're causing your child to be late for school. And it's causing a lot of stress on everyone in the family. These battles are happening every single day, and you're basically expecting them the moment you wake up. And so it's getting you very frustrated. You're losing your temper quite often on your child. You're rushing them because you need to get outside the door. And what's happening here is that it's causing a lot of tension between you and your child. And this is highly impacting the relationship you have with your child in a negative way. Not only are you seeing these issues at home, but you're also hearing that they're happening at school. Your child is very sensitive to the noises that they hear in the classroom setting, and they're coming home very agitated. You're also hearing this from their teachers too. If you're noticing that your child is a sensory avoider, it is important to find the right solutions right now. Don't wait until later on when they're a little bit older, hoping that they're just going to grow out of these sensitivities. Because in many cases, kids with sensory differences don't outgrow them. When we leave our kids the way they are without any supports, what happens to them as they become into adults is that they become fearful. They become fearful of participating in different activities because it was hard for them to manage as kids, and they'll continue to have these challenges as they get older. This will highly impact them from a mental health perspective. When they feel that they cannot participate and they have to avoid certain things, they feel different. They feel like something is fundamentally wrong with me. But when you can teach them, when you can support them about their sensory differences, that's what matters the most. That is what's going to help them learn how to manage their sensitivities and be able to function in everyday life. When we don't support a sensory avoider, there are also social challenges that are connected to this. Because when you're in social situations, there's going to be different sounds, there's going to be different lighting. The environment will be different from everyday life. And as a sensory avoider, that can be a very challenging adjustment for them. And if we don't give them the right supports, as kids and as adults, they will start to avoid these events altogether. You might be finding this is happening to you right now, where you're trying to get your child to go to a public event, to a birthday party, out to the grocery store, and they're having big meltdowns and refusing to go altogether. That's because to them, these environments are too overwhelming for them and they don't know what to do about it. The more and more we don't support them, the more and more they will continue to avoid any kind of social event. And this will have high impacts on their ability to make relationships when they're older. It's going to be hard to maintain relationships that they do have. And the list goes on in terms of how this can impact them from a social perspective. With all that to say, there are solutions. There are things that you can do today that are going to support your child and teach them the right strategies on how to manage their sensory sensitivities and help them to participate more in everyday life. But before we get into those strategies, if you've liked this video so far, please like and subscribe to my channel. This tells me that you are enjoying the videos that I am creating and helps me to create more videos just like this. Strategy number 1 for sensory avoiders: using proprioceptive input or deep pressure. When our sensory avoiders are in environments that are too overwhelming for them, their bodies go into fight or flight. This is a nervous system response to stress. When we integrate proprioceptive strategies, what we're doing is applying deep pressure onto their bodies, which will help them to regulate their nervous system and get them back into a place of calm. So here are 3 examples of different proprioceptive activities that you can get your child to do. The first one is using a weighted blanket. Now, a weighted blanket is something that you can buy off the market. What you want to make sure of is that the weighted blanket is about 5 to 10% of your child's body weight. While they're using it, I highly recommend that you stay there with them just to ensure their safety and that it is being used properly. The second tool that you can use on your child that will offer them proprioceptive input is something called a body sock. A body sock is a piece of fabric that your child is able to go inside of. It's kind of like a pillowcase, but a really big version of it. And the fabric of it is this really stretchy kind of material. So when they go inside, there's a space for their head that they can poke out of, and they're able to stretch their arms, stretch their legs out, and it offers this deep pressure onto their bodies. It's a really great tool that you can find off of Amazon that I will link in the description box right below. The third example of what you can do to offer proprioceptive input on your child is doing something called a burrito roll. This one is really fun. So what you need is a yoga mat, and you're going to get your child to lay down on the mat. You're going to roll them up like a burrito, and then you're going to apply deep pressure on them by just pressing on them firmly all over their body. This one is a really great activity that can be done at home. It can also be done at school as well for some of our kids who really struggle with sensory sensitivities that need some strategies in the classroom setting. Just make sure that you have a conversation with your child's teacher and they are aware of how to actually implement the burrito roll. The second strategy to supporting your sensory avoider is by encouraging them to play in sensory bins. Now, a sensory bin is essentially a bin that you're going to fill with different sensory material. It can be things like cotton balls, it can be filled with sand or rice or different toys that have lots of different texture. You can cut up pieces of sandpaper, and there are many ways to create them. I know on Pinterest there are many really great activities that people have come up with on how to create a sensory bin, so you can search up there for some inspiration. But sensory bins are a really great tool to get your sensory avoider to start playing with and start getting used to different textures. Now, generally, your child may be quite avoidant to touching certain textures. Maybe even things like touching water and washing their hands is a really big turnoff for them. But getting them to play and getting them to engage when there's low pressure is one really great way to help them build exposure. Because when we try to get our kids to wash their hands, when we know their hands are dirty and there's really no way out of it, there's a lot of pressure there and you might find a lot of resistance. So that's not going to be the best place to try to build their tolerance to the water. The best way is to get them to do it in a fun, productive way, such as a sensory bin. The third strategy for our sensory sensitive kids is to use obstacle courses as a way to build their tolerance, especially if they are avoidant of different movements and are fearful of going on to different playground or playscapes. So setting up an obstacle course in your home where you have things that they are comfortable with, like their pillow or maybe some cushions off of the sofa, and stacking them, getting them to walk on different surfaces is going to help them to get more comfortable and more used to getting their bodies to move in different ways. And this is just going to overall build their confidence so that when they go back out into the real world and they're climbing on the playground, they're going to have the confidence there to be able to manage and navigate all the different obstacles that all the other kids are doing when they're at school or, when they're playing at recess time. What I found working with many clients is that our kids get really fearful when there is a lot of things happening around them. So for instance, during recess time, when kids are typically running around, they're playing tag, they're playing soccer, our sensory sensitive kids are the ones that tend to stay back, they stay against the wall, they don't want any part in these types of activities. That's because the environment is way too fast-paced for them. They can't manage what is going on around them and they're becoming overwhelmed. So we want to build their confidence. We want them to feel confident in their own skin and to feel confident in the movements that they're making so that they can manage these everyday types of situations when they're at school. So how might we set up this obstacle course inside your home? What you can do is take some of your sofa cushions, you can take some pillows and get your child to walk on top of them. This is going to get them to work on their core strength and get comfortable moving their bodies as they try to balance over that. You can also put different floor stickers on the ground for your child to walk across, or even use some painter's tape for them to walk, and you're just going to make little zigzags across the floor and they're just going to have to follow that, putting one foot in front of the other as they move across. Strategy number 4. This is for kids who are sensitive to different noises. So you might be finding that you're blending something in the kitchen, or it's the weekend and you are in cleaning mode and you need to vacuum the floor. And these types of situations always trigger your child. They start screaming, covering their ears because they're complaining that this is really, really loud and really uncomfortable for them. In these situations, what you can do is offer them noise-canceling headphones. Noise-canceling headphones just look like regular headphones. They're going to cover them over their head and cover their ears, and it's just going to help to dull out the noise. This is also really helpful when you're out in public settings. I've had many families who have kids who are on the autism spectrum, and when they are out in the community and in the library or out at the mall, and there are other kids who are screaming, or there's just a lot of talking going on in the background. Maybe there's even lots of music playing overhead, and it really bothers your child, but you need to bring them into the store because you have no other place to leave them. You obviously can't just leave them outside the store unattended. Bringing noise-canceling headphones with you, being prepared, having them in your purse or your bag, and offering it to your child before you enter the store is a really great strategy in preventing any kind of sensory overload and sensory meltdowns that tend to come with their sensitivities. The final strategy I have for your sensitive child is using dim lighting. Now, a very common scenario that a lot of kids who are sensitive face is something called after-school collapse. This is when your child's had a very big day at school and they come home and the first thing that happens is a big meltdown. They start crying, they start screaming, they just tantrum on the floor and they're completely overwhelmed. And this is probably a very overwhelming situation for yourself as well. Now, this strategy here is to dim all the lights. You're going to encourage them to go into a room where you can have a small little tent set up for them where they can go in. You might have some little string lights in there. This is a really great way to help them calm their nervous systems down, because usually when they're at school, there is a lot of bright lights. A lot of schools use fluorescent lights, which can be very overstimulating. Or sometimes you might be finding that when you go out to a store, you're in the grocery, or maybe you're at a big mall and there's lots of fluorescent lights. When your child comes home, they have a big meltdown. Well, they might have been overstimulated by all the bright lights that by the time they get home, they're just melting down. So by setting a calming environment with dimly lit lights, will be a really great way to help them regulate their nervous system and get them back into a place of calm. Thank you for watching. I hope you found these strategies helpful, and please implement them with your child and tell me how they go in the comment section. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next one.